Hey everybody, this is David Shaw again with 5 Minutes of Photography. I am standing outside of my parents' suburban home just outside of Denver, Colorado, because today we're going to talk about aperture. So as you probably remember from my previous 5 Minutes of Photography talk, I brought up my camera and I showed what the P, A, S, and M functionality is for. And this time around, we're going to concentrate just on the A. That means aperture priority. Now, aperture, as I mentioned, is the size of the opening in your lens. It's not part of the camera, it's part of the lens. And the smaller the number, the bigger the aperture. I know that's a little convoluted, a little backwards thinking, but if you have a lens, like say this one, which is an f2.8, that means the aperture in the lens opens to an f-stop of f2.8. Now, if I have it set to f16, that means the hole's a lot smaller. And that has a couple of effects on your images. One, the wider the opening, say at f2.8, the more light is allowed into the lens. At f16, there's less light allowed into the lens, which means it affects things like shutter speed or your ISO, which we'll get to later. But for now, that's the first thing, the amount of light. The second thing it does, and this is really important for composition, is the aperture controls your depth of field. Now, the depth of field is the amount of the image that's in focus from front to back. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate right here. So you can see behind me, I've got this fence line. And it's kind of a perfect spot to test that. I'm going to use this lens, which is a 40 to 150 f2.8. I'm using a little bit longer lens because it emphasizes the amount of depth of field in a way that a wider lens will not. So I'm going to take a couple of shots. One set to f2.8 and one set to, I'll just crank it up to about f22, and then I'll show you the images and you can see what they look like. So here we go. Now, what that can do, when you see these images pop up, and I'll show them right about now, you can see that with the open aperture at f2.8, that first fence post is in nice sharp focus, but everything else is pretty well blurred. However, at f22, everything beyond is also more or less in focus. And that can really play a big role in how you compose and use your images. So, as a homework assignment, what I want you to do, heck, we're all probably on lockdown right now anyway, step outside in your backyard, shoot in your living room, whatever the case may be, and make a couple of images. One wide open at whatever the fastest your lens will operate, and one kind of closed down at f16 or f20 or f22, something like that, and just see the differences. And then you can think about how that images can be used. So one example might be with portraiture. You might want to have a very blurred background to set your subject back, and that can be true of wildlife shots, that can be true of human portraiture, any number of examples of things like that. However, with a landscape image, you may want to have everything in focus from front to back in order to see your foreground sharp and your background sharp. In fact, with landscape images, that's often a big goal because a blurred area can look distracting. So anyway, think that through. This has been 5 Minutes of Photography, number 2, and thanks again for joining me.